And we are live, coming to you from somewhere off planet, from the ether and into your ethernet. We are now in the twilight of retrograde, and it's now time for the Zodcast. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Going to jump right into it because it's going to be a bit of a short show. I might catch part of the Astros game. I haven't even checked the score. I think last time I looked, it was like 1-0. But we'll go over a few interesting things. Hopefully, everybody had a good week, and you're not dreading next week too much. So here's some stuff I found. This was kind of interesting. This little thing on the left, it was something about a meteor shower or something. I think this was posted 2 or 3 days ago, called the Ornid meteor shower. Peaks tonight, and it had this star pattern here. I think it's Orion or Orion. I don't know. Who knows? It's been a long week for me, but it's talking about the radiant. Reminds me of Radiant and Celestial Navigation. I thought that was kind of Zodiac-ish. Of course, Radiant is how the directions of the light, but it just made me kind of think that was something kind of Zodiac-ish, of course. And then this was also, I don't know where I picked this up. It was an old post from one of the Zodiac message boards. It said, the first cipher anagram reads, Donald Gene Harned, Salinas high school teacher. I think this guy was this guy back in the day thought they used to make it a case for Don Harden being the Zodiac. Of course, the guy that him would, along with his wife, helped break the Zodiac's 408 cipher, the first one. He set the key in. Of course, he was a school teacher. And it says it's William Baker diagnosed Zodiac as paranoid and schizophrenic. Harden's wife had schizophrenia. I believe that's true. It said Harden's wife was also paranoid. Evidence of her being paranoid is that she was to be afraid of a reporter. And I heard she was also really afraid of people coming after them after they had solved the 408 cipher and it was in the paper. I think she was worried about the Zodiac, but a lot of people claim that she believed her husband was the Zodiac. And this says Betty Harden was known to frequently wear a T-shirt which read, I married the Zodiac and all I got was this stupid T-shirt. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's really funny if it is. She was really odd. I know she went by the name Valerie for some reason. Her name was Betty, but she went by the name Valerie. And they got divorced. I'm not sure how many years later after the cipher was solved, but their daughter remembered them when they solved the cipher and remembered them spending hours and hours on it until they finally cracked it. So I never thought there was much in the way of Don Harden being the Zodiac himself. I mean, I guess he did insert himself when he did solve it, but that one was, even though the professionals were unable to solve that cipher early on, it wasn't, near as difficult, of course, if it was to solve the 340. It was a lot simpler, and I think it won it solved. And I also think that Concerned Citizen, of course, the cipher key sent in by Concerned Citizen, I 100% think that was Zodiac. And I think that was Don Cheney, because remember the Concerned Citizen card said, I do not wish to give my name because it could be mentioned by the slip of a tongue, something like that. That's a phrase that we know Don Cheney used in at least one interview, slip of the tongue. So that whole vibe of Concerned Citizen really reminds me of Don Cheney a lot. Hey, Keith. Hey, Darnell. Sorry I missed you a while back. Hey, Anthony. Just catching up with everybody in the chat. Hey, Patty. There's Plate C. Hey, you've been out for a while. Yeah. You were enjoying the very last few weekends of summer. I wonder where you were. I was starting to think that you were going under another name. Good seeing you too. What were you doing? Oh, you were 4x4, and oh, that's cool. That'd be fun. I'd love to do stuff like that. You too, Darnell. Hey, Tony. Oh, Tony. I knew I was going to mention it online, but Tony sent me this belated birthday gift. This is a Bakersfield High School yearbook, the Oracle from 1951. I'm still going through it to see if there's any suspicious activity in it or anything Don Cheney related, but I'm sure there's something in here. I just started going through it, but I got it yesterday. But this thing's in mint condition. Whoever it belonged to, see, Tony sent a nice note. I always keep these handwritten notes that people send me, especially from a good friend like Tony. Tony's a great guy. Tony's done some incredible Zodiac research. He's one of the top people that I've ever corresponded with that finds really good Zodiac information, along with Neil Arnold and a couple other guys. But Tony's always been at the top of that list for sending good Zodiac material. And I also wanted to thank my buddy Sean Ball for sending this magazine. It's one of the green spaces he helps manage in Oklahoma City. And Sean wrote me this nice note. Of course, it says, "This is the Zodiac speaking. Just kidding. I hope this note finds you well." And then he ends it with a cross circle logo. And he even writes it, since Sean's a graphic artist. He even did it in some Zodiac style handwriting there at the top, which was kind of neat. So I love this kind of stuff. I always hold, anytime somebody bothers to write something out is really special. So I always hold on to this stuff. I love it. So thanks, Tony. Thanks, Sean. I really appreciate all that. And I definitely think I'll find some good stuff in that yearbook, because that's one I haven't had. Always find a lot of some people in there, like Paul Avery's friends. A lot of them went to Bakersfield High School before he met him at Bakersfield Junior College. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting about Valerie Hardin, of course, how she was paranoid, and she eventually was scared that she was going to get attacked. And I think Don Hardin eventually bought a gun, but this guy was really anti-gun, never was known to own weapons or anything like that. And I cannot remember who that guy was on YouTube that used to push Hardin as a suspect. I know his videos are still on YouTube, but he suddenly went quiet at some point. I think he just gave up on it, or I don't know. Maybe he's watching tonight. If he's still out there, I don't know. This is from Neil in our Zodiac group. He said, "A rather interesting post which appeared a few days ago on YouTube. I followed up with a series of questions which didn't unfortunately bring further information. Even so, in Robert Graysmith's book, Shooting Zodiac," and Neil's the one that finally got me interested in reading that book, Don Chaney stated exactly the same thing. He also added that Darlene was killed because she turned a male down. Firstly, how would Chaney know this? And secondly, as with many of his memories, Chaney seemed to remember more as the years went on, which isn't what happens with memories. That's true. Remember, he always said that he can remember more now than he could back then. If Chaney's tales are true, it's possible that Darlene knew Arthur Lee Allen, or more likely, Chaney was the person who Darlene gave the brush off to. I've often thought that, Neil. I really did. I always wondered if it was him, married or not. I always thought that could be possible. If true, and it's big, if Chaney's theory and the YouTube poster's comment suggest the crime, let me blow this up. Let me read it again. If Chaney's tales are true, it's possible that Darlene knew Arthur Lee Allen, or more likely, Chaney was the person who Darlene gave the brush off to. If true, and it's a big if, Chaney's theory and the YouTube poster's comment suggests the crimes were inspired by Agatha Christie's book, The ABC Murders, where several crimes are used as a smokescreen for one particular crime. Thoughts. Of course, he put this out to a group, of course. Yes, and the only person who mentions ABC Murders, of course, is Don Chaney, and his name was Arthur Lee Allen. So my point on this whole thing has always been, I don't know how Allen and Chaney could not have known Darlene Ferrin. If she worked at that IHOP that's that close to Arthur Lee Allen's house on Tennessee Street, where you could literally fall out of his front door and land in the parking lot, because I've been there. I've been to Allen's house. I've been to that IHOP, which is now a Mexican restaurant. They are like on top. I mean, it is. Look it up on a map how close that IHOP was to Allen's house. You know, he went there quite often. I mean, Allen was no stranger to food. Heavy guy, just a place to hang out and get coffee. You know, he must have known if you go to a place that much, it's literally 300 or 400 feet or whatever it is from your front yard, you're going to know probably every cook, every waitress in the whole place. After just a few months, you're going to get to know them, because back then the waitresses would get to know you a little better. They would talk to you. He lives in the neighborhood. I don't see how Allen could not have known Darlene Barron. That would be stunning. And you know that Chaney visited him there quite a bit. So both of these guys probably knew her on some level. And I even read where someone speculated that the reason that Darlene left working at IHOP to go to Cherry's Waffle House was that Allen was harassing her. I don't know what that's based on, but it could be true. But hey, that is the whole premise of the book, The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. One of the murders, it was actually a brother trying to kill his own brother, but it was about having one targeted murder and then do some other crimes around it where, it confused the police and the investigators, to which they didn't know which was the targeted crime and which were not. It was all just to kind of blend it all in together. Like in this case, Neil's talking about the target was always Darlene, but these other murders were done to make it into something different where they'd never be able to focus in on who Darlene knew. And plus, obviously she knew a lot of people, but if she was your target and you did other murders around it, well, they're busy trying to figure out who was the guy at Berryessa, who was the guy that killed Paul Stein, who was the killer at Lake Herman Road, and that's the whole premise behind ABC Murder. So it's funny that this gets suggested because that's kind of the premise of the book ABC Murders, and that Cheney throws it out there. So maybe Darlene was the target. Either way you look at it, it's something worth considering. Oh yes, he did. He had residents in the same area. I don't know if you're talking about the his good friends, the Austins. Cheney had really good friends that lived in Vallejo that probably had nothing to do with Arthur Lee Allen, no connection to Allen at all. Their closest family friends of his family, meaning his sister and his mother and his father, lived in Vallejo at the time of the murders. These are people that he could have gone and stayed with, no problem. I mean, they were very close. There's plenty of newspaper clippings where the Austins came and visited them in Bakersfield. I haven't found one where the Cheneys visited the Austins in Vallejo, but there's plenty of articles where the Austins, who did live in Bakersfield at first, and then I think the father of the family was, I think he was a welder for the Navy, so he either transferred or moved to Vallejo for that work. So they were close friends. He went hunting with the Austins, so Cheney absolutely had a place to stay in Vallejo outside of Allen's house that was only about another 5 miles away from Arthur Lee Allen's house. That's a fact. Breakfast at IHOP before going hunting or fishing. Sure, I'm sure they did. How could they not? Tuckered Out, is that related to tasty tater tots? I don't know. Maybe they had those at IHOP. I'm not sure. But I'll get to that. That's of course the theme of the show. 100% true that memory gets worse over time. Not John Cheney's, it gets better. Yeah, those are cool. I always collect all that stuff, and of course, I've got a good little collection of yearbooks going. So thanks, Tony. Let me totally off topic, but and there were and what the title is, and then there were none. I haven't heard of that one. Murder on the Orient Express. Yes, that's a good book. I definitely know that one. Haven't heard of the first one. If anybody else has, let me know what their favorite Agatha Christie book is. There's another one. I cannot remember the title of it. It seemed like there were some Zodiac connections in it. I can't remember the name. It was another Agatha Christie novel. So let me go on to this one. Okay, so hence the theme of tonight's show, and all tuckered out because it was a long week for me at least. It's talking about Arthur Lee Allen's friend, of course, Phil Tucker, that Arthur Lee Allen used to work with at the Greater Vallejo Recreational Department, where they were in charge of like the swimming pool, the diving, and all that kind of stuff. Because Allen, obviously he was a state champion diver, and you can never really visualize that. But Arthur Lee Allen, he was not bad looking. He was a nice looking guy in high school. I've shown pictures of him from the last show. He was very good at obviously the trampoline and diving. They said he looked terrible walking up the diving board and all the way walking out on the diving board. But once he did his dives, he was literally poetry in motion. I mean, he was good. I mean, state level diving champion. Arthur Lee Allen was a good athlete. That's probably one thing that really did mess him up later on in life, when he lost the ability to dive and do all these things that he was kind of known for. And that's why his younger brother did look up to him. Ron looked up to him because he was a kind of a big deal in high school and early after high school. He was. I mean, he was looked up to by a lot of people. Taught kids in the neighborhood how to jump on the trampoline. And of course, no one knew he was a child molester at this point. Maybe some people could see some signs of that, but no one really knew it back then. But going back to Phil Tucker had always claimed that Allen talked about the most dangerous game, or the idea of hunting people, because they were intelligent and they could possibly kill you back, and this kind of thing that of course shows up in the 408 cipher. But the main thing I'm focusing on is, and it says right here from one of the files, it says Tucker also indicated that Allen had an interest in codes and that he had seen a handwritten Zodiac type cryptogram at Allen's house prior to any cryptograms being published in the newspaper. Most of them say this, including the Bauer report. It says that according to Tucker's testimony, that he had, I've seen the year published as 1969, but it says before any cipher was published. And of course, the first ciphers were published at the end of July of 1969. But he claims that he had seen this at Allen's house in a gray box. There was papers in the gray box that had Zodiac like cipher symbols written on them, and that Phil Tucker was there with his wife. He had been, I think, fairly newlywed, maybe not even a year yet to his new wife, and his wife had seen these cryptograms as well, and she backed up her husband's story of seeing these papers in Allen's box. And they asked Allen about it and said, "Hey, what are those?" And he told the story how he got them from another patient at Atascadero, and that he was that this a patient from Atascadero Hospital. And this is not when Allen was incarcerated there after molesting a kid years later. This was when Allen actually worked at Atascadero State Hospital, which is also kind of doubled as a prison. But apparently, Allen said that this guy was a mental patient and that he had gotten these cryptograms from this other patient that he knew there. And the guy was having some sort of dispute with his attorney. And I don't know what that had to do with the ciphers in the box, but this is just the story he gave. So Phil Tucker's wife was taking a college class or something at the time, and it kind of related to somehow like criminal psychology or something that related to what she was doing. So she said, "Hey, I'm taking a class in college and those are really interesting. Can I borrow them? Or can I have a copy of one at least?" And he said, "No, not right now, but maybe later." Some kind of response like that, where he didn't totally blow her off, but of course he did not give her a copy of it either. But the point I'm making here is how important it would be to know or verify, other than just what Phil Tucker said, which is backed up by his wife. Did they actually see these ciphers in this little gray box that Allen kept in his room? And Ron Allen also backed up the fact that he had this gray box with items in it. But I don't know if Ron Allen, Arthur Lee Allen's younger brother, of course, ever saw the ciphers in it as well. But I know Phil Tucker and his wife did, and that she was adamant about the fact that they looked like the Zodiac symbols on them, and she wanted to borrow it, and he said no. But this is critical. If they actually saw this before they were printed in the paper, that is an incredible piece of circumstantial evidence. Of course, it's all circumstantial in this case. Let's face it, the physical evidence hasn't matched anybody. But if that's actually true, that it predates July of 69, you can't get over that. That's just massive, because I know Tucker and his wife, eventually they got divorced, but they never broke from that story. They said that they had seen these ciphers in the box. And that's just one that I always go back to. If they really saw this, how is Allen going to be in possession of this stuff? I mean, I can understand if they were already printed in the paper and Allen's trying to act like, he wants people to believe he's Zodiac, and he definitely led people on that way. If he was Zodiac or not, he definitely wanted people to think he was in the beginning. But having the ciphers in the metal box, or there's like the whole thing I'm saying is there's way too much to go around Arthur Lee Allen. It's like Don Chaney said, if Arthur Lee Allen was not the Zodiac, it was somebody that knew him. Well, Don knew him, of course, but that's when Don Chaney actually makes an honest statement. If it wasn't Arthur Lee Allen, it was somebody that knew him, because there's just too much circumstantial evidence swirling around Arthur Lee Allen to ignore. It's not just one or two pieces, like the fact that Allen would misspell words for comedic effect, like the Zodiac. That alone is incredible. And then going back to the watch, we all know now, no one disputes the fact that Arthur Lee Allen was given that Zodiac wristwatch for Christmas 1967. His brother got an identical watch. People try to claim, well, those watches were common. No, they weren't. A Zodiac watch is kind of like it is now. Now it's about roughly, I mean, there's different price ranges, of course, but they're fairly expensive Swiss watches. Now they go from like, I don't know, $600 up to like two or 3,000. They've got some porcelain models now. They're really cool looking watches, but I think the porcelain ones are like $1,500, $2,000. I mean, they're not expensive as a Rolex, but they are higher end Swiss watches. Back then, Vallejo was a working class town. A lot of them worked at the Navy, the Naval Yard, Mare Island, all this kind of stuff in there. These were blue collar people, either in the Navy or worked for the Navy, or they were welders. This was a very, very blue collar town. Not many people living in Vallejo had a watch that expensive. They just didn't. They were not that common. Yes, he could have just seen an ad in a magazine and got the inspiration for the watch there, but not many people had them that were wearing them. So that's anybody making that statement that many people were wearing them back in the day that Arthur Lee Allen got one for that Christmas is lying to you, because they were not that common. It wasn't like a Timex. They were more expensive watches that appealed to people that were divers, skin divers like Allen. His model was a Seawolf model. I'm assuming Ron's was the same identical watch, a Seawolf model watch. And I think it sold back then for like $250. That's a lot of money back in 1967. $250 today, in today's money, is like $1,100. So they were not that prominent in and around Vallejo. But you see here, it definitely says that it says prior to any cryptograms being published in the newspaper, also indicated that Allen loved to try and outsmart the other guy. Tucker indicates, let me blow this one up. Tucker indicates that in 1969, he owned an older brown Corvair that was beat up, and that Allen had driven this Corvair. He could not specifically indicate whether Allen drove this Corvair on July 4th, 1969. Of course, that was Blue Rock Springs. It should be noted that a witness at the killing at Blue Rock Springs on July 4th, 1969, of course, we're talking about Mike Mageau, described an older brown vehicle, possibly a Corvair, as being the responsible vehicle. So there's that another piece for Allen, that he did have access to the Corvair. So the point is you cannot get away from the avalanche of circumstantial evidence pointing to Arthur Lee Allen or connecting to Arthur Lee Allen. And someone had said once that, well, this is all because of Graysmith and Graysmith's lies from Zodiac, and then it gets made into the film. Who was the prime suspect in the Zodiac Killer case before Graysmith's book was published in 1986, I believe? Arthur Lee Allen. Arthur Lee Allen was the prime suspect before Graysmith ever published his book. It was known. He was being looked at ever since Cheney came forward in July of 71. Of course, they knew that Detective Lynch from Vallejo PD had interviewed him just a week or so after the Lake Berryessa attack, and Allen came up with that whole story about, well, I had bloody knives in my car. So if you saw that, that had nothing to do with Lake Berryessa. Of course, no one ever saw these knives. This was just Allen taunting the police like the Zodiac did. So there's way too much going on with Allen. If I learned anything in the years that I wrote my book, and of course I believe Cheney was the mastermind because Cheney had the skill sets, but Allen has more to do with it than I gave it credit for early on. It's the only thing I ever would admit that I've learned since. Said you bought your niece a used F-85 car in 1971 for $300. Yeah, that shows you how far $300 could go. I found the price list of all the Zodiac watches back in like 1970, and they were around $200 to $300. Very expensive watches that you're not going to see in that blue collar working class town of Vallejo. It's just the guy that made that statement is ignorant. I'm sorry. Those watches were not common. Allen's mother was just kind of generous and liked to kind of spoil her sons. She definitely spoiled Arthur Lee Allen. I mean, he had a catamaran. He had that Carmen Gia. He had all kinds of stuff that she gave him. He had the trailer in Santa Rosa. Who paid for that? He had 3 trailers. People don't know that. He had not just the one in Santa Rosa. He had 3 trailers that who knows what he did. I mean, there could have been evidence stored at one of the other trailers. He had 3. And an San Francisco police officer told me that. They know for a fact he had 3 trailers, not just Santa Rosa. I mean, the guy had a lot of toys, and Mama bought them. Darnell, if it wasn't Arthur Lee Allen, I think it was somebody who knew him. Perhaps they wanted to ruin his life. True, but let's assume that's Cheney, and Cheney wants to ruin his life because he touched his daughter's bottom, which I know A lot of people like to go for that little tidbit just to explain why Allen would want to implicate Cheney. I mean, and why Cheney would want to implicate Allen in the crimes. Well, if he's that upset about it, one, why didn't he call the police? We've said this before. Two, why would he stay friends with him for by his own admission from 6 months to a year and a half? Why would he do that? He's so upset about it. He could still tolerate hanging around the guy for hours on certain occasions after this incident. He can keep that inside before he comes up with this diabolical revenge plan that he doesn't bother to enact until July of 1971 is when Cheney wants to get the ball rolling on the revenge tour, when the event with his daughter, if it's true, had to have happened in 1967. So you're all of 68, 69, all of 70. You're talking almost 4 years to come up with this crazy plan of revenge. I would think the guy would be pretty cooled off in 4 years over this bottom touching incident. That if that was true, let's just say that's true. It's not Allen and it's not Cheney. But you believe that Don Cheney did this all for revenge from this incident with his daughter. That's strange. That's as strange as the Zodiac case in itself. A man that would stay friends with a guy and wait 4 years to accuse him of being the most notorious serial killer of all time. That's how he decides to get his revenge. And it just so conveniently worked out for Cheney when he's going to accuse his buddy of being the Zodiac that his friend would misspell words for comedic effect, that he had a Zodiac watch since 67, which of course Cheney would have already known about all this. But how convenient is that? I mean, that's just a little too perfect for me that he's going to accuse his friend of that. And then if it was all about revenge on Allen and getting him back, which, he succeeded in making the guy the number one suspect in the case. Good for you, Don. But when Allen dies in 1992, Cheney's more than happy to keep the stories going. So if it was all about revenge, you think after Allen's 6 feet under that he would be okay with that. And if they came out and said, well, his DNA didn't match, blah, 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 you think he'd just be quiet. The guy's dead. Well, you got your revenge. He's dead. What else do you need to do? Why you don't need to back up your reputation. You could just say, hey, well, I don't know. Just leave me alone. Anybody else would have just stayed quiet, but not Don. He decides to give a full interview for his name was Arthur Lee Allen. He's more than willing to participate in that and just to keep talking, and his story keeps on changing. So if it's about revenge, why did it keep going so many years after Allen's death? So that whole thing doesn't wash. Even if you believe the bottom touching story, which his daughter denied that later on, not that she could remember it, but she said it never happened. So you have to take that into account. Number two, she was born in late 63. So in 67, and this is when Cheney said this incident happened. So you got to go with that because he's the source of something happening from Allen touching her. So you have to go with the date he gave. And he said this happened in 1967. She was born in late 63, which means she would have been roughly 3.5 years old. I mean, Allen was fired from Valley Springs for inappropriately touching male and female students, the way I understand it, at Valley Springs. But these were elementary school kids. I mean, the youngest would have been 7, 8 years old. He had no history of anyone as young as 3.5. Not that he wouldn't do it, but it's just a little too off. I think that was just a backup. I really do. I heard that Arthur Lee Allen was a small game hunter. The 22 long rifle sounds like a rifle used by a small game hunter, or I've never heard the term plinker, but yeah, he was, from what I heard, he was a small game hunter, but he wasn't a hunter per se, not like Don Cheney. He wasn't a big game hunter whatsoever. Cheney was. Cheney hunted bigger game. Allen, I think, did some, varmint hunting or whatever, rabbits or whatever you would shoot with the 22. And he did own a couple of 22s, no doubt about it. But yeah, 22 does sound more like Allen. Of course, there was a lot of talk of using a 22 in shooting Zodiac, about how why a professional serial killer would even want to use a 22, meaning you could have shot someone with it and wouldn't have necessarily killed them because it was such a small caliber round. Yes, I know you said that before, Tony. That's true that Allen's mother did pay off some accusers. I thought I saw that. Maybe you found that before, where that Allen was paying off Arthur Lee Allen's mother had paid off certain people that were accusing him of molesting their kids. I think there's either I've seen proof of that or it just sounds like something she would do. Even though he still hated his mother, she was always spoiling him and going to bat for him. Yeah, that's it. I didn't know that. The SeaWorld model was popular Vietnam War servicemen. Do you remember that watch, Tony, in Vietnam? Anybody ever have a SeaWorld? That'd be cool. Nero Wolf radio show. Could be. Definitely ALA and Cheney. Could have been Panzarella, could have been Tucker. Could have been Phil Tucker, but who knows? I know Tucker and Kidder, Arthur Lee Allen's other two buddies, got in trouble. I don't know if they got indicted, but they definitely got arrested for embezzling money from the Greater Vallejo Recreational Department. It was in the paper. I think that happened. That was after the murders. It was like in 72, maybe early 72. Those guys got in trouble for embezzling money from, county funds or city funds. They were both embezzling. So those guys weren't, I talk about Phil Tucker and what he saw with his wife, which could definitely be true, but though that he did get in trouble for embezzling money. Yes, he did. He did poaching. That's true. Yeah, that is true. 22 will travel inside the body. I mean, he definitely worked. I mean, he killed I don't know. I don't know. I thought I read where Phil Tucker had died. The wife had an Italian last name, and they did get divorced, and I think her name changed back. But I would love to track down his wife and see what she remembered, because that's such a big clue. If they actually did see that, I mean, even though Tucker got in trouble later on, it doesn't mean he was lying about that story. But you never know. I know one thing for sure is Phil Tucker claimed that he had never ever met Don Chaney, and Don Chaney said that he had never ever met Phil Tucker. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but they both claimed the one did not know the other. Yes, Professor Horn knows a lot of stuff. He makes a lot of connections. Yeah, the couple kill. Yes, on the couple kill on the near the beach was shot with the 22 as well, and so was Edwards and Dominguez. Yep, Dominguez. Edwards again. Dominguez was a 22 long bullet. And Onvet bought a Rolex at the PX in Japan, kept it in a box, and he got an estimate on Antiques Roadshow of about 500,000. I think I saw a clip of that. I bet that's an awesome watch, especially if he kept it in a box and never wore it and was in mint condition. He probably got it. Yeah, he probably hardly paid anything for it if he got it at the PX in Japan. I'm gonna look that watch up. I bet it's really cool. It was the Swindles. Swindles were the San Diego couple. It's Ray Swindle and his wife. I think they were newlyweds, Ray Swindle, or was it his fiance? I don't remember, but the San Diego couple was the Swindles. Yeah, that was a 22. Of course, so was Dominguez and Edwards, and then Blue Rock Springs was a 9mm, and Stein was a 9mm. And we don't know what the gun was at Lake Berryessa. We just know it was an automatic. But since he never fired the gun, we don't know what. More than likely, it was a 9mm at Berryessa. If he'd had a magazine in it, I would assume it was probably a 9mm. Too bad we don't know. Would love to know what kind of gun that he was carrying at Lake Berryessa. Let me check the other slide. Okay, that's always Dan Corky. What was the other deal with the book? Remember the book that had that weird message in it that was at the library in Salinas, and People think that Zodiac wrote it, and it was something about Harden. I don't remember. You remember that, Tony? Whatever was written in that book. It was a copy of Gray Smith's Zodiac, and somebody wrote that note in it, and someone found it at the library in Salinas where Harden lived. Can't remember what that message was. That's how long I've been in Zodiac. I can't even remember some of that stuff that people used to talk about, whatever that note was written in there. Like it was written like it was like Betty Harden wrote it and was trying to claim that, I don't know, that it was Dawn was Zodiac, or I can't remember, but she had written, there was a strange message written in the copy of Grace Smith's book at the library. And I assume they were still married then before they got divorced. That was in Vallejo, where there was something about, it was either football or baseball tickets, but it was in Vallejo, plate C. I got to look that up. That's been so long ago. It was something about some tickets that were sent to somebody in Vallejo with a note. And I think that was like in 73 or 4, but I got to go back and look at that. If anybody remembers, jog my memory. But yeah, it was either football or baseball tickets. Amtrak ran the California coast in the 60s, or was it freight only? I say this because the suspect named Sandy could have been a rail bum shooting Swindle and Dominguez. True. And who were the two guys that were, oh God, what were their names? The two guys that, of course, Sandy was the lead suspect because Sandy had killed the older man there. And then the two buddies that Sandy was running with that day. What was their name? I can't remember their two names. Shoot, where's Ross? He'd know him in a heartbeat. But when they signed into a hotel in like Aurora Grande area, not real far from there, not far from Santa Barbara. I think it was in Aurora Grande. They signed into a hotel, and they told the woman working there that they were from Bakersfield, which was interesting. That whoever those guys were claimed to be from Bakersfield, which I thought was interesting because, of course, Don Chaney's from Bakersfield, and one of them had the name of that I tried to find if one of them ever did live in. I mean, of course, they could have just made it up, and of course, they just claimed they were from Bakersfield. But I thought it was interesting that they said they were from there. To whoever the lady was at the hotel, what was their name? I can't even remember. Yeah, there was a story about some tickets being sent to somebody. He might be rather. They might have been. I don't remember if they were football or baseball or San Francisco Giants tickets, but they were mailed to somebody in Vallejo, and they claimed to be the Zodiac. I have to look that up. I'm sure Richard remembers. He knows all that stuff, but I think it was in the early 70s. Definitely wasn't in the 60s. It was like 72 or 73. And I don't remember what the note said, but not a whole lot else came of it. One of them was Reed. JC Reed. One of the guys was JC Reed that was with Sandy, the Sandy from not Panzarella, but the Sandy that they think it was a lead suspect for the Dominguez Edwards murders. Coleman and Reed. Coleman was the guys. J.C. Reed and somebody Coleman. The last name was Coleman. Coleman and Reed were the two guys, and said they were from Bakersfield when they signed in the hotel. Yeah, they killed the old man. My brain's totally dead. I can't even remember his name, but I remember Coleman and Reed were the name of the two guys. They named that suspect Sandy because, yes, that's true, because he had sandy blonde hair. Did ALA or Cheney have sandy blonde hair? Cheney had like light brown hair. I don't know about Allen. Allen had blonde hair, but I don't know if that was Sandy. But Allen was way too big to be. The Sandy from Dominguez and Edwards was described as James Coleman. Thanks. J.C. Reed and James Coleman. But no, Sandy from the Gaviota Beach slayings, if it was him, was described as he was little. He was a little guy, kind of short, like me, 5'7", and he was kind of scrawny the way he was described. He wasn't real tall. Of course, Arthur Lee Allen's a big guy, 6 feet tall. He couldn't have been Panzarella either. Of course, Sandy Panzarella is another Sandy, but Panzarella had kind of brown hair, but couldn't have been Panzarella. I think Panzarella was younger than Allen, but he was Still a little too old to have been the Sandy from Gaviota Beach, because that Sandy was younger. I think he was described in his early 20s. Panzarella was already like 29 or 30, and of course Allen was like 30. Shoot, what was it, Allen 33? Maybe not that old yet. No, not in 63. I guess Allen would have been late 20s too. Yeah, he was too young to be either one, or Panzarella. The Beach Sandy was too young to be any of the regular players. But I can't remember the J.C. Reed and Coleman signed in as claimed they were from Bakersfield, which who knows, probably lied, probably just something to say. But going back to what you Cat Daddy said about the rail bum, I thought of that before. The Amtrak running the coast. That would have been really convenient to take the Amtrak. That's a good line of investigation there, to check the Amtrak. Didn't Amtrak have that logo that kind of looked like Zodiac? I don't remember. You need to get a Ouija board and try to reach out to ALA and DC. Somebody did a spirit box on YouTube with contacting Arthur Lee Allen. I don't remember who did it. I'll have to look for it. But if you Google it or search YouTube for it, there was somebody did a spirit box with Arthur Lee Allen. Not Cheney. Somebody needs to do Cheney on a spirit box or a Ouija board. Yes. You're thinking like we all think alike. Yes, or a spirit box. Oh, Amtrak was 71. Well, then that wasn't on time, but what it could have been, they had to have some kind of like passenger rail back then, though, right? Even before Amtrak, was anyone doing passenger railway? Of course, ABC Murders was involved, the rail lines. Definitely something to look at that. I want to see that Rolex but that's really cool. No, I'm gonna look that up, see if the Tuckers are still around. Yeah, RFK was shot with a 22. Wow, I'd forgotten that. Man, when you go on RFK, that would go on forever. That guy that took the pictures, the high school kid that took the pictures, man, they took his camera and never got any of that back. The guy that was on Unsolved Mysteries. Darnell, Drew, out of all the true crime things that I've seen you participate in, my favorite thing was when you did the courtroom segment on that podcast. You were so awesome in that. You mean the one I wasn't treated so fairly on, Darnell? Is that the one you're talking about? The one you thought that I didn't get treated like a guest should be treated? Is that the one you're referring to? I won't say anything about it. I choose not to remember that, Darnell. Yeah, I think that RFK was killed with a 22 short, even less than a 22 long rifle. Yeah, the long rifle is just more powder, right? Yes, that one, but I still thanks, Darnell. I still won't mention where that podcast came from. I thought I did pretty well, even though I probably got edited pretty severely in that. Zodiac, this is my story. I started the Zodiac case and ended it. The last half of the book is theory. When I write the true ending, it will shake the earth. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Tony. I knew you'd find that. Okay, this was inside a copy of Graysmith Zodiac. that from the Salinas Library, and she did send it Betty and had that B in it. It says, "This is my story. I started the Zodiac case and ended it. The last half of this book is theory. When I write the true ending, it will shake the earth." Betty Harden. Yeah, that was always, a lot of people thought it was a hoax. Some people thought it actually could have been her. I think they tried to match the handwriting to Betty Harden, and I think she signed it Betty, which was her name, but she, like I said before, she went by the name Valerie for some bizarre reason, but she was pretty kooky. There's no doubt about it. She was out there. Let me take this down. Yeah, have you heard about that before? Yeah, that's out there. Look, it's there's pictures of it online where you can see how she supposedly signed it. But yeah, that's one of those things that is the guy tried to use as part of his evidence that Don Harden could have been the Zodiac. I mean, first of all, Don Harden was pretty thin, he didn't match the body descriptions. He was not known to ever go near weapons. He had eye problems too. He was having an eye surgery at the time or had just had eye surgery at the time that he solved the cipher. So I don't know if one of his eyes was okay enough to be able to shoot at people at night, but he had vision problems. Thanks, Patty. It was great in the podcast, even though the lady on the show was very nasty. No comment. But I think you're right. Very nasty. No need to be nasty. I can definitely take a challenge to my theories, but don't be nasty. Yeah, that is as well as a letter to Melvin Belli, and the front of his door number was recreated on the envelope. That's true, which means the Zodiac stood at his front door. Very true. Yeah, but the Betty Hard thing is interesting. But she was worried. She was very paranoid that people were going to come after him, and then he wound up buying a gun, and they said it was the first gun he ever owned. Could have been more to that. Yeah, I think they did. I think Arthur Leon's mother was paying off victims. It's definitely something she'd do to kick that down the road and just hope he grew out of it, which he obviously never did. Yeah, we do need to hear from Corky. I just woke somebody up somewhere. Whoever likes to go to sleep listening to this show just woke up. Who was that poor guy? He was so mad at me. Yeah, Sandy Betts claims that she was followed around. Did she claim that she found the hood in the back of her that she saw the Zodiac's hood in the back of her car or something? I corresponded with her a little bit because she is from Vallejo. Didn't go very far because Sandy is a follower of. So that's about as far as I'm going with her. Yeah, that's a good idea, Darnell. That is a really good idea. Definitely want to do that. We'll do that soon for sure. Yeah, that poor guy. I hope he wasn't totally asleep when I just woke him up, whoever his name was. That's true. Freight trains had actual hobo gangs, and they had their own hobo language. Like they had their own symbols, and that was part of, like, somebody said that they look like Zodiac symbols, and they tried to do the comparisons. I don't know who did that. Maybe I think either somebody Ned interviewed or developed that. I don't remember. See, been doing this so long, I'm starting to forget all this stuff. But there was hobo symbols around the where the freight trains would go, and it was their own kind of language, like encampment or whatever. The other hobos would show up and see the symbols, and they'd kind of know what was around there wherever the train would stop. And somebody proposed that some of these look like Zodiac inspired symbols. Can't remember. I don't know. Jeff Zabrowski. Was it you, Jim? Was it really you, Jim? Don't lie. Thank you, Lisa. You definitely want to catch up. Sandy's story falls apart because Sandy's story falls apart because she said she dated a cop or cops who could intercept the so-called stalker and identify him. I don't remember that, but she said some pretty crazy stuff early on. But I think she kind of backed off of it at some point. I mean, she never rescinded it, but I think she stopped talking about all the really crazy stuff. The note was signed Betty. Yeah, the note was signed Betty. I remember the B. I want to have. I definitely want to have Anthony Dunn on to do a Yuba County 5 show. But I think we're making progress in that case. I really do. You feel like 12 Zodiac Killer as cult-like. Speaking of Ned, I love interviews he's been doing on BBO. Yeah, Ross just did the last one. Our good buddy Ross did a little Cooper and he did some Zodiac. Two of my favorites. And I'm pretty sure Ross agrees with me that DB Cooper and Zodiac were not the same people. You'll get, of course, Darnell, you'll get an autograph. It won't be worth anything, but you're gonna get one. And God, who said that my autograph would be worth something someday? It was Wayne Rogers. Remind me to tell you the Wayne Rogers story. When I was a kid, I got to meet Wayne Rogers. And he said, somebody asked Wayne Rogers was sitting next to me at an event, and somebody asked Wayne Rogers for his autograph, and he said, "Why do you want my autograph? You ought to get this kid's. It's gonna be worth something someday." I never forgot that. I think I was 12 years old. I thought maybe Wayne's on to something. Thanks, Cat Daddy. Well, I think he was military. I think he was in the Air Force. I think he was in the Air Force and learned how to navigate in the Air Force. Oh, you did? Yeah, you did. Anthony did. Anthony discussed on his channel the hobo symbol stuff too. I think you ruled it out, right, Anthony? You kind of ruled them out, which I agree with. I don't think there's much to the hobo symbols. I agree with you on the weather, because you kind of came to that outside of me thinking that a lot of the weather symbols look like that logo and a lot of the cipher symbols. So I think we agree that they're probably more likely to come from something like that than the hobo symbols. Because I'm pretty sure that's what you said. Yeah, definitely check out Anthony's channel. He's got a lot of good stuff. Has a lot of good DB Cooper videos, financial videos that are good. All Anthony's stuff is good. So definitely check out his channel, Anthony R.R. Mills Show. You need to do some more Cooper. I think you did. I think you did one. You did another Cooper, a couple weeks ago? I know I watched it. No, that's a good comment. I think the FBI knows more about the Zodiac, but nobody wants to come forward because it will expose law enforcement as incompetent. Yeah, there was a lot of they still talk about it. A lot of the ex law enforcement. Yeah, Anthony said, yeah, weather symbols. I agree with you. I think the weather, even if it's not Cheney, I think it does. I think it's the weather symbols. Jeff Lebrowski was a POI. No problem. Anytime. Yeah, Ned, I'm supposed to do a live show with Ned. He already wrote me. I don't know when we're doing it or what time it would be, because since Ned's in the Philippines. He put up some beautiful, like if you follow Ned on Instagram, Man, the beaches are really pretty there. He's in Cebu, Philippines. They got a couple of really pretty beach shots. So Ned's gonna be a beach bum and doing YouTube. I mean, that's a good life, Ned. Just keeping up your channel and hanging out at the beach and not dealing with traffic. Of course, I know they can get kind of rowdy around you, Ned, doing the partying and stuff. But other than that, I think that's not a bad way to go. It worked for Art Bell, at least for a while. Of course, Art came back after a while. You know, who could the third person be? Is it like Jerome thinks? Is it Panzarella? I mean, there is some weird stuff about Panzarella, I gotta admit. Could it have been Freaky Fred Manali? You just cannot shake Fred Manali. I mean, if any person's writings sound the most like the verbiage in the Zodiac letters is Fred Manali. No one's even close. It's just that Fred Manali's too tall, too skinny. If Fred Manali was 5'11" and stocky, he'd be a great Zodiac suspect, but he's not. He's thin. He was like 6'3". Didn't have the mathematics side going for him, but his letters, because there was a lot. He was a creative writing teacher at Santa Rosa Junior College, so a lot of his writing samples are out there because he was a writing instructor and a writer. But the way he spoke and some of the phrases, and he used "I shall" a lot, like Zodiac. His phrases are the most like the Zodiacs of anyone. It makes you wonder if Allen knew him, if Cheney knew him. I don't know. That's a good point, Tony. FBI knows that Toschi wrote 3 Zodiac letters. Could Toschi wrote written the 1978 letter? A lot of people think he did. That's the "I'm back with you." Do you think that Toschi wrote that letter? Because that's the one that the DNA comes from. When you hear about Arthur Lee Allen was negative for the DNA, what letter did it come from? The best sample came from the 1978 letter, "I'm back with you." And of course, that's non-canon Zodiac. That sample did not come from the Exorcist letter. Of course, they claimed that the 78 letter, the small sample they got, matched another 74 letter. I don't think it was Exorcist, but another Zodiac letter written in 74. But that's just it's totally unproven. All we know is that the main DNA sample they were using, the strongest one, came from the 78 letter. So that means the DNA is in play for anybody because they don't have it. Yep, Tony, 78 letter for sure. I mean, even Druser, who we don't agree a lot between the two of us, even Druser doesn't think that 78 was written by Zodiac. Richard does, but a lot of people think Toschi wrote it. Of course, we know Toschi got caught writing letters to the other guy and had to admit it, but he never admitted to writing Zodiac letters. Just for the record, he never did. He always denied writing letters claiming to be Zodiac. Yeah, I don't know when they started making the wing walkers, but the main base that they said came from, I think was it Lackland? What was the Air Force base? There was one in California that had small amount of the wing walkers, but Cheney was out of the Air Force in 59, 58, 59. And I don't think they were making wing walkers until the 60s, but I'm not sure. But the one Air Force base that said they had the most of them was in Texas, and it wasn't Harlingen. Where was it? Because it's the one that Cheney was at before he went to Harlingen that said it had the most. Um, yeah, it was Lackland. Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, had the most wing walkers there. At their PX store, they had the most wing walkers. There was another Air Force Base in California that had some, but they had apparently had 10 times more at Lackland. Like that would have been the most abundant place to find that particular wing walker that they found the footprint from. Lake Berryessa. Now, Gaikowski would be a stretch. But if you could ever prove any of those guys knew each other, you'd be on to something. Or, hey, I'll throw another one out there is Spinelli. What about Spinelli? Yes, Viking slave, uh, all things Norse. Of course, Arthur Lee Allen's grandfather was from Norway. Hansen, his name was it Arthur Ferdinand? I think he was named after the grandfather because his name was Arthur. I think his grandfather was Arthur Ferdinand Hansen on his mother's side, of course. Father was from Kansas. But Arthur Lee Allen did have Norwegian roots. Oh, this one. Oh, if I could go back in time or if I could do it now. If there was anybody alive right now I could interview with the Zodiac case, that's easy. If it was people that are choosing from who's alive right now, Karen Allen, all day long, Karen Allen. I would love to talk to Karen Allen if she would be open to it. But she wasn't even real talkative, I think, when they made the film, is like as I was reading and shooting Zodiac. But if anybody alive right now is going to be Karen Allen, I mean, all day long. Going back in time, I'd like to talk to Cheney, of course. I would love to talk to Cheney, like who did when he interviewed him at the Hood River Inn. Isn't that ironic that who interviewed Cheney at the Hood River Inn in Hood River, Oregon? No pun intended with the hood, but yeah, definitely I would like to talk to Cheney and just see the expression on his face when you say, "Oh, where did you go to junior college, Don? Bakersfield? Really? Tiny little BC college that shared a little campus with your high school? And did you know a guy there that his name was Paul Avery? You never bothered to mention that to us, Don. Or that you had a relative named Paradise?" And just to see his reaction. But anybody alive today would be Karen Allen all day long. Um, there was a guy that didn't live too far from me. I would have loved to have interviewed that died. Like I tried to get a hold of this guy through Facebook, and it was Don Cheney's brother-in-law, the one that where he worked at Fleur. Actually lived, 15 miles from where I am right now. His wife's still alive, but his brother-in-law, Don Ebersole was his name, and he lived in Sugarland, Texas, which I could hook on 99 right there. I could have been to the guy's house in 15 minutes from here, maybe 20. And I really missed an opportunity. The guy wasn't that old, passed away. I don't know of what, but I would have loved to talk to Don Ebersole too. And I missed a chance. Guy lived driving distance, and I tried to get him through Facebook and called a number that went to a voicemail with no greeting. But Ebersole would have known a lot because remember, Ebersole was the guy that was in the floor cafeteria. According to Cheney's story, Ebersole is the guy that saw the newspaper and said, "Hey, doesn't that look like your buddy Arthur Lee Allen?" And then, that whole thing. But Ebersole was his brother-in-law and did not live far from me. And now that chance is gone. Never. Yeah, the Norse stuff the rune stuff is very intriguing. A lot of it is. I think it was more. No, it was maybe Morford, somebody that was really convinced that it came from the ruins, the one symbol we're talking about. Yes, Wingwalker. Wingwalker boots in California, size 10.5, which I think that means it's a 13-inch. I don't know that 10.5 is the shoe size, but I think the end to end was 13 inches on the shoe. And then they did try to do the impressions of the shoe and try to determine how heavy the person was that left the shoe print at Berryessa. And I think that was Hal Snook, of course, who plays into the hoax theory. But I think they were the person that left the impression weighed around 225 or so. So was Larry King carrying around weights or something? That's a good question. Do you think the case can be realistically solved today? And if yes, how? I don't think it's going to be ever solved to everyone's satisfaction. I think any DNA is probably tainted unless they have just better technology in the DNA on some of the Vallejo letters and meaning Vallejo PD, the ones in their possession. They sent those off for advanced DNA testing 4 years ago now, and nothing ever came of those letters. And the hope is that Vallejo stored their letters better than SFPD. Um, but they never came out and said if they found anything. Of course, the rumor started that they did get a decent DNA profile off of one of the flaps from one of the letters that was in possession of Vallejo police, and that it belonged to someone that could not have been Zodiac. So later you find out through the grapevine that it was the DNA of a female. So that couldn't have been Zodiac because we're looking for a male. So who knows if maybe Zodiac had a female lick that, but I don't know if any of that's true because that could have all come from a source that Corky here says is not very reliable. But it is true that Vallejo sent their letters off for testing, and they never came up with another statement. And I mean, thinking 4 years, you would have found something. So unless that technology gets better, I just don't think we're going to have it. We're just not going to have it. You have the bindings from Lake Berryessa. They were all handled barehanded. You have the SFPD letters are a complete joke because they were handled multiple times. They were families took them home. Who knows who touched all the San Francisco letters? I mean, they were completely compromised, and so were Vallejo's too. I heard somebody got to handle the Vallejo letters in person, barehanded, and almost got the person that let this individual handle them almost got fired. Was the story I heard. So those are kind of compromised, where you're just finding too many people have touched them. So unfortunately, it's going to be tough to solve unless somebody comes up with something later. And like like that's a good question. Like anybody could interview now and try to get somewhere with. It would be, if I'm right, it would be Karen Allen. It's got to be Karen Allen. What Karen can remember. I think Ron Allen's still alive. They're still married. They have a daughter, but they're older now. I think Ron was a little bit older than Karen, but um, I think Ron's at the age now that he's just not going to remember much. But I think Karen probably does. And I would just love to sit down with Karen Allen and see what she remembers, because Karen met Ron at Cal Poly Pomona at the time that Ron's best friend was Don Chaney. I mean, Don was the best man, or Ron was Don Chaney's best man when he got married. I don't know who Ron's best man when he married Karen, but Ron Allen was Don Chaney's best man when Don got married in Pomona. So I would just love to, just something small that Karen might remember about Don that, looking back, or, he was kind of odd or anything like that. I would just love to talk to Karen Allen, but I don't think it's not going to happen. I wish it would. I'd love to try her again. Not female was written by someone who couldn't possibly. Now they claimed it was a female from the DNA from the Vallejo letters. Someone who couldn't really be Zodiac, like Tosky. Now that'd be interesting if they got a good enough DNA sample that they could have actually traced it to a DNA database, and it came back to someone named Tosky, or anybody they could connect to Tosky. That would be interesting. Like, some of the letters that people swear had to have been Zodiac. Like, what if the Exorcist letter came back to Tosky? That would be funny. Then you'd really have to throw that out. The handwriting style of Hal Snook and the writing style of the Zodiac letters is outright scary. It makes me wonder sometimes just how many are involved. Yeah, Snook's got a pretty good match. But there was also another Napa cop. Of course, Hal Snook was Napa. There was a police report of another. I don't know if he worked Berryessa or not, but there's a police report from the guy, and he was working there at the time of the murders, and he's got a better handwriting. His writing's even better match to Zodiac than Snook. Yeah, definitely the 78 letter. Yeah, I wish they could. I wish they could compare that sample from the 78 letter to Toski. But who knows where it is? Lady at the post office could have licked it. That's true. You wonder if the crazy guy who called into the Jim Dunbar should have talked with Melvin Bell while he's still alive. Who knows? I mean, that guy was crazy though. He was insane. I don't remember his name, but he was crazy. So I don't know. He can't be in his right mind if he's still around, unless they found the right drugs to get him on. It was 12. It was 12 inches. That's true. If Cheney and Allen save things and someone finds it, there was that rumor that Cheney's daughter found some interesting things when she was clearing out her father's stuff in Benton City, Washington, when they drove there. Um, a guy had put that on YouTube somewhere, and I finally found that guy and talked to him, and he just remember reading it somewhere. So I don't know how confident he was in that statement, because they did search Cheney's house in Benton City. I mean, that many years after the crimes, of course, after the whole fiasco with the lie detectors and Cheney, where he got drunk and then they had to postpone the lie detector, and then he took it again and it was inconclusive. It was sometime around there where Bauer did search his house. Of course, they didn't find anything, but look how many years later that was. But Cheney was hiding something. There's no doubt about it. He wouldn't have gotten drunk before a scheduled polygraph. There's something he did not want them to know, and he was worried about if he could get it past them or not. I would love to know the questions they asked him. And Allen, too, by the way. When Allen had to take a polygraph at a Atascadero, of course, he passed it. Allen passed it. Of course, they claim you might have been on tranquilizers at, like many of them were at Atascadero. Who? The guy by the name of Sandy that really blames Gaikowski. Oh, are you talking about Blaine? Are you talking about Blaine? Blaine's the guy that brought forward Gaikowski. And we're not exactly friends. That guy, oh man, he tagged me in a Facebook post calling me everything he could think of. He went off on me like crazy, but fortunately I saw the post and I knew I was friends with him on Facebook, but I guess he never knew I mentioned him, and I guess he finally read my book, and he was not happy with me at all. So fortunately I had to block Blaine. Patty, are you still here? That's true, Tony. They never scattered to my knowledge, they have not. To my knowledge, they have not. I don't think they ever did. And that's strange, man. That's really strange, because they were planning on doing it for a while, and his son was building a special trailer to go make the trip up to Poets Creek in Idaho. Yes, Patty is here. But they were going to go spread the ashes at Poets Creek, Idaho, which was Don Cheney's favorite place. According to his son, where he could spend eternity there at Poets Creek. So it tells you he wasn't what religion he was. He didn't believe he was going on to some, I guess, afterlife, unless it was, haunting Poets Creek, Idaho. But the way he's phrased it, so he was definitely not religious in terms of like a Christian or something, where you would go on to heaven and not, when you would spend eternity in heaven as a Christian. But the way he phrased it was he would spend eternity where his ashes are spread. But maybe he just meant where his ashes were. I don't know. But they were supposed to do that and never did. So it makes you wonder. I don't know. I don't know. That's I never thought of that. Can you get DNA from ashes? I would doubt it. I mean, it's already. I totally forgot, Jen. What's the score? I even forgot about the game. What's the score? I meant to check. Cheney would not make a bomb when back then you could buy dynamite over the counter. True. I don't know. Good question. I don't know. Well, he's got a son and a daughter that are still alive. And he's got a lot of relatives that are into like ancestry. So I'm sure he's got relatives that are in a DNA database somewhere with his name. I know he's got an aunt or an uncle that probably had submitted their DNA to one of the things. Who's winning? I guess it's us if it's 3-2. Now, Jen, you're the voyeur of DrewTube. You're the voyeur. I doubt you could DNA out of. I doubt you could get DNA out of ashes, but that'd be interesting if you could. But the bones, oh yeah, put bones and teeth for sure, no doubt about it. Fire can damage DNA beyond recognition. I know, like if it spends a long time in water too, it can. I think that's why they couldn't get good DNA from the West Memphis 3 case. I do too, Plate C. I think it's him. I really think it's him in the costume at Barry S. I always have. I just think that's him. I just think he's the one in the costume because one, he could sew. He could have sewn that. Oh, Rangers are okay. Well, you're you're up in Rangers. You live in Ranger territory, so maybe you're split loyalty. No, I know you're for the Astros, even though you live closer to Ranger land. I think it was Cheney in the outfit. I really do. Mainly because the brown hair could be seen through the eyelets. He had brown hair. I got one picture where his hair is very long in the middle. Even though he had a widow's peak, he could grow his hair long in the middle, like I wanted 75 I have. Championship series. Whoever wins this will go to the World Series. It could have been, I had an ex-cop tell me that they were getting really close to arresting Allen for Blue Rock Springs. He said it was imminent. But maybe, like I said on the last show, maybe they didn't do it because they knew Allen was dying and that Mike Nail, the DA that would have presided over it, wanted to be a judge. They didn't want to spend the $1 million minimum back in the day to try to do that trial. It would have had all kind of media inquiries of Zodiac. They probably didn't have any real smoking gun on Allen, but they really felt that he did it. They felt the Vallejo PD felt strongly that Allen was the attacker at Blue Rock. They did. I know that. I know that from insider stuff. They really believed that was Allen at Blue Rock. And you should stay that way, but just keep a low profile. There were some pretty upset Ranger fans the other night when Altuve hit that bomb. So it'll be 3-3 if the Rangers pull it out. Oh, I'll check that. Just making sure I didn't miss anything. I think that is it for tonight, but definitely tune in next week, and we're going to do a Halloween special. So I was thinking about reading my book, Asleep in Hell, which is a true story. I might do that, and then I'll upload that, and then I'll do a live Halloween special. I might actually, and I haven't done it before, but for the people on here that I know are the regulars on here, if you have a ghost story, I'll put the link in the comments, and you can come on live and tell your ghost story. I'm going to do that. That's going to be the Halloween special. So I don't know if that's going to be on the regular night. Probably is, because next Sunday's still before Halloween. So we'll do that. And if anybody wants to come on It's got to be somebody I know. Like, at least I've seen your name in here before, because you never know who you're gonna get come on the show and start uh, saying something weird. But that's going to be the Halloween special next week, so you definitely don't want to miss that. All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a good week.